Hey, it's great to be here. So, what is a Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence Warfighter Support? When I got the call, I was driving from Seward, Alaska. If any of you ever been to Alaska and drove from Seward up to Anchorage, it's a beautiful 2-hour drive. You know, you can see the mountains with the snow on the tops and eagles flying around, a bear maybe running across the road. I get this cell phone call from Admiral Eric Olson, who was a mentor of mine, 4-star at the time, commanded U.S. Special Operations Command. And I answered the cell phone. You know, it's a 2-lane highway. I took a chance. You're not supposed to really talk on a cell phone. My wife's with me. And he goes, "Hey, Ray, how would you like to be the Deputy Undersecretary?" And it kind of fizzles out. You know, I hit one of those cell voids, and I go, I think they're offering me a job, because I was coming up on my end of my tenure up there as the commander of U.S. Army Alaska. So we run to the next highest, bench top where we pulled over and got some cell coverage and called him. He goes, "Hey, thanks for calling me back. We'd like to offer you a job. It comes with a promotion, but you're going to go up there and work for the Secretary of Defense, and then under him is a guy by the name of Mike Vickers, the Undersecretary of Defense for Intel of Charlie Wilson's War of Fame. If you've ever seen that movie, the little CIA nerd who was playing 4 games of chess and beating everybody. He's not a nerd and he doesn't play chess, but he's a brilliant guy. That's my boss, so I work for him. So today it's Ashton Carter, it's Dr. Vickers, who's getting ready to retire, and then I work for him. And my whole role in life is I'm the ISR task force guy for the Department of Defense. When Secretary Gates was the Secretary of Defense and we were hot and heavy into Iraq and Afghanistan mid-2000s, he got very frustrated with pushing the speed at which we pushed equipment to the soldiers out in the field in harm's way. So think things like the MRAP, right? He was very frustrated, couldn't get that armor protection to the kids that actually needed it. So he created the MRAP task force. He created the Contingency Contracting Task Force. And he also created the ISR task force. And my role in life, and that's my night job basically, is because my day job's in the intel business. But my night job is what really applies to this crowd most, and that is how do we push aircraft and sensors on the aircraft, a variety of intelligence sensors. And then the IT, the communications pipes that move the digits to somebody that does something with them, the PED, the processing, the exploitation, and the dissemination. You know, how do you push that stuff into the mind of a commander? And so we've been working really hard at doing that. And I'll tell you what, it's marvelous what I see industry providing our great troops out there in harm's way with ISR. Everything from space down to rubber rocks and actually submarines. And that's what I want to talk a little bit about and how that applies to MUM-T. Because manned-unmanned teaming, in my sense, is, satellites aren't manned. Global Hawks aren't manned. Predators and Reapers aren't manned. Rubber rocks aren't manned. We even have little remote control submarines that I want to get all of this stuff operating with the man. So, I mean, our technology is crazy these days. So when I learned that when I was asked by Howard Yellen to talk about man-unmanned teaming, first thing I do is go to Google or my iPhone and I say, what is the Army's concept for man-unmanned teaming? And she says,
checking. Okay, I found this on the web for the Army's concept for man-unmanned teaming.
Then it gives you a whole bunch of stuff. Here, a web search, in about 10 seconds, I got manned-unmanned teaming. Can I have the next slide? When I think of Army's man-unmanned teaming, I take out the Army slide, and it seems very confined, very tactical, operational. And that's important in case we have to go against a revanchist Russia someday, or a rising China, or Kim Jong-un's North Korea in a conventional sense. But what I want to talk about today is just a little bit broader from where I'm looking at it from the Department of Defense, because what you see in that slide is hugely important. But what I'm going to show you throughout the next 20 minutes or so is what we ought to be thinking about from an industry perspective on how to build manned-unmanned teaming and integrate it into all the other things that our other services and our partner nations around the world are building. and beyond, okay? Let's go to the next slide. So, these are 15 things that on any given day with my day job, working in intelligence, that we deal with. 3 years ago, when I took this job, I live up on the hill there, Arlington Cemetery, in a place called Fort Myer. And it takes me a total of about 5 minutes to get from my kitchen to the C-ring of the Pentagon in our skiff. And 3 years ago, I would think about 4 or 5 things on the way to work. I don't know if you guys do that when you're on your way to work. Okay, what am I going to tackle today? What am I going to accomplish? And then when you're on your way home, what did I accomplish, right? Little feedback, do your self-assessment. It was about 3 or 4 things. You know, we were coming out of Afghanistan. We had the whole 9800 thing that we had to build down to, troops on the ground. The Arab Spring sprung, so we had a lot of potential issues going across North Africa and into Southwest Asia. And so today, it's those 15 things in red. I mean, metastasized global jihad. For our last presidential election, we were talking about, you know, how we had Al-Qaeda Maine there hiding out in the Fatah on their hills. And we did, and we still do, right? But that whole jihad thing just kind of metastasized across the globe like we're watching right now. Who would have thought that a month after Sochi Olympics that Russia would go ahead and take Crimea and be doing all the kinds of things that they're doing in eastern Ukraine? I already talked about the Arab Spring. Insider threats, Fort Hood 1, Fort Hood 2, Navy Yard. We can't be the only country on the planet that today I can grant you your 5-year security clearance, and 4 years, 364 days from now, you could be an axe murderer that whole time before I grant you another security clearance. You know, we have to have continuous evaluation and make sure that, particularly through our contract base, that we're securing all the great things that we're trying to put in our soldiers' hands. And on. I could talk about Al-Shabaab till the cows come home, Boko Haram, what's happening in Yemen here. And we've got a bunch of embassies that are vacated right now. Libya, Syria, Yemen. We have no representation there. And that's what makes our partnerships so key around the world. So I'm glad to see some of our great partners here today. But when I think about doing manned-unmanned teaming for the future, out of all those trends that are out there, all the global trends, 3 stick out in my mind the most. And it's population growth, urbanization, and the connectivity of that population that's going to be very urbanized. And today, we have 7.2 billion people on this planet. And there was a study done by the University of Washington, it ended last year, that studied population trends. For the last 20 years, it's been thought that the population of the planet would continue to grow, so we're 7.2 billion today. It would probably go up to 9 billion by the year 2050, and it would table off, right? There's a variety of reasons for that, but this University of Washington study that came out with a bunch of social scientists from around the world inputting it have dispelled the last 20 years thinking. And what's going to happen with our population on the planet now, they think that it's going to continue to go through 9 billion and potentially up to 12 billion people on the planet by the year 2100. And that means, and if that population is urbanized and it's connected, just think what the implications are for the defense sector. I'm going to show you a little video that I found on actually SOCOM showed it to me at first, and you can get it off the web. But it just shows how rapidly things are changing over time. If you bear with me, I think it sets the stage for the rest of my pitch. Can you show the video, please? And I might add, this has to do with aviation, but it could just as well be agriculture, medicine, any of the industries out there. Somebody smart, a lot smarter than me, once said that the most expensive real estate on the planet, does anybody know where the most expensive real estate is? On the face of your iPhone. Think about that. And I would love to pull all of that capability and put it in the hands of a soldier out there on the front lines. Everything from a satellite, a U-2, Global Hawk, Predator, Reaper, every kind of C-12 that we can put a ball on it and put it in the hands of a soldier. But because I think the way the world's going, we're going to need it. Population growth. Can I go to the next slide? This here is an upper left-hand corner. My pointer's not so good. It's a picture of Rio de Janeiro just last year. What happened there last year? Big sports event, World Cup, right? That little slum city outside a nice city of about 7 million people in Rio de Janeiro is a slum estimated to be about 69,000. You think there's running water, sewage? There's a lot of electricity. It's provided by little Honda generators, and that's a connected city. And by the way, next year, 2016, we're having the Summer Olympics there. That city will still be, that slum city will still be there. In the upper right-hand corner, in 2005, that happy snap was snapped, and in 2013, you notice the difference? That's outside the Basilica, St. Peter's in Rome. And 2005 is when Pope Benedict was inaugurated. And then just 8 years later, look at the difference of connected people taking a picture at Pope Francis's inauguration. The lower right-hand corner is a picture of a little slum city, the largest slum city on the planet. It's outside the city of Mumbai. Mumbai has about 20.7 million people and growing. That's called the Dharavi slum. What's interesting about that is they don't know the population of it. It's estimated to be somewhere between about 300,000 and perhaps 1 million people that live there. But what's interesting, it's super connected. It's got its own GDP of somewhere near $1 billion a year. It's international. Pottery, leather, textiles, and that sort of thing. You think there's running water and sewage and that sort of stuff in there? I mean, we're just outgrowing these government's ability to take care of that. And just think of the kinds of problems that's going to create. The lower left one is my favorite one because it illustrates what I'm talking about. That's the city of Delhi. It's got about 21 million people. It's the second largest city on the planet. It's going to, in the next 10 years, it'll probably surpass Tokyo as the most populous city on Earth. But look at all those wires. That is a connected place. And it kind of reminds me of in 2003 when we were in Iraq, we were in Kuwait and rolling into Iraq. I remember one day about 1700 or so, the sun was setting in the west, and I was flying in the back of a Black Hawk from the southern extremities of Baghdad, about 200 feet AGL, right straight across the city and exiting to the north. And nothing really stuck out. It was a beautiful day, and I remembered 1 month later, just 1 month later, very same flight profile, south to north, 200 feet, 1700 at night. Something starkly different. In a matter of a month, there were thousands, tens of thousands of these little round dishes all over the roofs, in between the buildings, and many of you guys know what I'm talking about, right? And I was thinking, man, I wonder what the heck kind of information is pouring in there. I hope it's the good guys pouring information. Of course, we all know the rest of the story, right? You know, mortars, rockets, all that shit keeps coming down at us. And so I learned pretty quick that information is a huge weapon. And so think of the implications of that for manned and unmanned teaming. Next slide. So when I parachuted into OUSDI as the director of the ISR task force and then the warfighter support guy, I came into this thing that I like to describe as a wonderful mess. Of course, you know, the Apache paired up with the Gray Eagle and the Apache paired up with Shadows or some of our other variant small UAVs is all part of this mosaic. And that's what I'm trying to tell you. I showed you a picture of our Army's concept of how we would employ this on what looks like a conventional battlefield at the beginning. But I think if you're going to have a growing population, a lot of it around the littoral, It's going to be urbanized, and it's going to be super connected. We need to think about how we're going to harness the rest of our enterprise that's illustrated in that wonderful mess right there. If you look up in the upper left-hand corner, you guys probably have heard these terms called MIP and NIP, right? The National Intelligence Program and the Military Intelligence Program. These are big budgets, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, this year, we're going to spend $68 billion on U.S. intelligence. That's 1,000 millions, 68,000 millions. That's $68 billion. That's a lot. About 18 of it is on the military intelligence side, and that's what we're going to use to buy some of these systems here, these intelligence collection systems that will partner with the man-unmanned teaming. Now, our budget trends are going down, and we have, I like to say, wonderful, because we have a lot of toys in our garage that we've been playing with, because we've had a night job. We've had all these supplementals to go out there and buy things. And you've all heard the old adage about you can have something good, fast, and cheap, but you're only going to have two of those things, right? You can have something good and fast, but it's not going to be cheap. You can have something good and cheap, but it's not going to be fast. You get the picture. And so in some cases, as our budgets are flattening out, particularly the armies, okay, we're going to have to be very scrupulous and use what's out there in the garage, kind of like the old Apollo 13 adage where, you know, don't tell me what it was designed to do, tell me what it can do. We're going to have to take a lot of these systems that are out there in our garage and make sure that we're using them to the maximum extent that we can. And where we have double and triple and quadruple of these systems, we're going to have to clean out the garage a little bit, right? Now, if by chance, you know, suddenly those budget trends go up, then maybe we're back to what we've been doing for the last 10 years with big, healthy budgets, and we can buy frivolously, but I don't think so. I think that those kind of budget trends, for the sake of our national security, is we're going to have to spend a little bit more scrupulously. When we're looking across how we're investing our military intelligence program and how we're investing the Army's procurement dollars, we need to look across these 5 different bins, and I have them illustrated around there. Expanding our global coverage, what that means is, look, when we do collection on bad places around the world, what we do is we weight the effort on the most likely places where we're going to have issues. So about 70–80% of our collection goes against the top 5 or 6 priority areas, right? But then every now and then something like ISIS pops up. You know, we weren't collecting a heck of a lot over Iraq when ISIS knocked at Baghdad's door nearly a year ago, right? And then so suddenly you have to play kids soccer with your ISR assets and move it over top of Iraq to figure out what the heck's going on there so that you can do your job. What we need to do is expand our global coverage. There's a couple ways of doing that, right? You invest in space, you invest in our allies. You know, ask them to spend some of their treasure to buy their fancy airplanes and put balls on them and send their digits somewhere and do something with it. So expand our global coverage, improve the ability to operate in A2 and AD environments. We're not going to put a Predator over top of North Korea, all right? We need to be able to operate in denied airspace, and you do that through space-based assets, you do that through cyber, you do that through human in some cases. Sustained CT and CP advantage. We in the United States have the world's greatest counterterrorism capabilities, bar none. And that's why we need to sustain that. And these verbs here, these action verbs, are key, and I'd ask you to focus in on them. So you see expand, improve, sustain. That ought to tell you something about how our budgets are shifting around. And over in the left-hand corner, strengthen counterintelligence and security. I already talked to you about the security clearance aspect. From an industrial espionage perspective, we are having our pockets picked by some very clever, artful dodgers around the world. And we need to tighten our act up from an industrial security perspective, as well as from insider threats. I was so happy to see that yesterday's episode at the NSA gate was not one of those. At first, when the reports started coming out in the press, I thought it was some insider kind of thing where we have another Fort Hood 1, Fort Hood 2, or Navy Yard event. And the last one is improve cyber operations capability and capacity, and that mostly from a defensive perspective. I think that we need to be able to defend our networks, and that's an emerging domain in and of itself. Next slide. So I'm going to spring this on you. I spring it on a bunch of different crowds. When I go back to thinking about man-unmanned teaming, it's not necessarily about the technology. And here's the challenge I'll lay on industry and academia, if there's any academics in here, as well as my military brethren, is it's really about the people. If you remember anything that I'm talking about, no matter how technologically advanced we get with these cell phones, it's really going to come down to the young captains that are company commanders, the sergeants that are the platoon sergeants, all the way up to the Secretary of Defense who's working at the National Security Council to craft good policy from the White House. It's really about the people, and it's an understanding. That is a complex world that I tried to describe in that video and the way the world trends are going. And let me just walk you through here. Value of our people is equal to adaptability times integration plus collaboration in the bow legs there to the understanding power. If I start with integration, I want to integrate. Integrate is nothing more than connecting things, right? And then it just sits there. It could be two cans in a string. It could be a satellite with a good IT pipe down to some distributed ground station that pumps it into DCIGS, Distributed Common Ground Station, that pumps it into our laptops or our cell phones all around the world. But if you integrate something and you stop right there, well, you got two cans in a string. Collaboration is something different. That's an active. That takes leadership. That takes somebody doing something across that integrated network. So we got to integrate it, but then we got to collaborate on it, and that takes human activity. To the understanding power, that's why I use that little asymptote there with that upswinging arrow that matched the video. I work my butt off in the morning before I go to work. I probably pour through the news for 2 hours before I even leave my house. And then I go to the Pentagon, and I get all the classified networks, and I have an intel briefer assigned to me from the Defense Intelligence Agency. We go through the President's Daily Bulletin and all that stuff. And I compare what's happening in the world in the news with what's happening in the intel. And I'm just a C+ student. I mean, it takes me a lot of work to understand. And that's why I put the understanding piece at the exponent. So you can integrate, but you got to collaborate over it, but then you really got to understand. But if you don't adapt, if you don't take action because of what you understand, then you're not doing us any good. Your value to your corporation, your value to the Department of Defense, to Defense Intelligence or National Intelligence is not everything that it can be. And so I'll wrap back around to our value that we're bringing is, despite all the great technology that we have out there, it's really about people being able to connect that technology with some value proposal for what you're trying to do. And I'll finish with this last slide and take questions. Next slide, please. Bottom line, it's about our people. Leadership's always going to always count. You know, we talk about network-centric and warfare. I think that's a bunch of baloney. Networks are important. Of course they are. But I believe it's leader-centric. That's what really makes a difference with organizations, particularly big, complex organizations like the Department of Defense. It ought to be leader-centric. Understanding counts more. That's to the U power, okay? I think I said enough about that. But adaptability, if you can integrate, you can collaborate, you can understand. But if you don't adapt and stay ahead of the trends, then your value to the organization is not going to be what it can be. And so let me finish with my story of the blind Marine. I like to do this. Many of you guys know General Cody. He has a little helicopter that he flies wounded warriors and their families around 4 or 5 times a summer. And he brings some of us old aviators up there, and we're the pit crew, right? We flip hamburgers, and we're safety officers, and we bring the kids and their wounded warriors and their kids and their families and put them in the helicopter, and he gets to fly them around and all of that. And it's really a great, great experience. But the very first time that I did this up there in Carlisle, the bus shows up. They brought him up from Walter Reed that day. And off comes this Marine, and he's got crutches. And his sister He was 29, and I think she was 26. And a year prior, almost to the day, he got blown up in Kandahar. And she became his, basically, bedside attendant for that whole year and was living in Washington, Walter Reed. And many of you guys I know have been up there, so you understand what I'm talking about, right? And so he was in crutches. He had sunglasses on, and he was sitting there waiting for his flight. So I sat down beside him. I said, "Hey, how's it going?" He goes, "It's not so bad." He goes, "I got this titanium plate in my head. I got a little traumatic brain injury, but I'm getting therapy, and I'm going to be okay." He goes, "This eye got blown out, so I never see there. But this one here, when they were operating on this one, they nicked a nerve or something like that, and it blinded me in here, but they think that I'm going to get my eyesight back someday." He goes, "I got this external fixator on my right leg, and when I get rid of this, I'll be able to get rid of the crutches, and that's pretty cool." He goes, "But my hearing's killing me." I go, "What happened? Did you get your eardrums blown out?" He goes, "No." He goes, "My hearing adjusted. It adapted for my lack of ability to see." And I got to thinking, because the Snowden thing happened right after that. And I said to myself, I wonder if, at my level now, if we're going to be disciplined enough to adapt our investment to compensate for, I naively thought it was all about SIGINT, NSA stuff, because he was from NSA. It turned out that it was really across all our ends. But the point stuck with me that if a human body can adapt, can institutions adapt to stay ahead? And that's the challenge for all of us.